0418 local time. A tree line 38 kilometers behind the front line. 5 BM-27 Uragan launchers, sitting in a hide they had used 11 times before. The crews believed the rotation schedule was keeping them alive. 90 minutes between shots. A new position each time. Back inside the tree line before first light. It had worked for 6 weeks. It stopped working in 8 minutes. Retention. Checkpoint. 030 hook resolution Ts. What you're about to hear is not a story about a lucky strike. It's a story about a system. A sensor-to-shooter chain that Ukraine has been quietly building since 2022, now closing loops fast enough to catch rotating rocket artillery before the crews can reload. Keep that word in mind, loop. We'll come back to what closing it actually means. The 414th Separate Unmanned Systems Regiment, Robert Magyar Brovdy's unit, did not get lucky in mid-June 2026. They got patient. 11 days of patient observation, cataloged by HUR SIGINT teams, building a pattern out of something the Russian 944th Self-Propelled Artillery Regiment thought was unpredictable. A $500 fiber-optic FPV drone and one HIMARS pod, worth $1.6 million, eliminated an estimated $24 million of Russian rocket artillery in under 10 minutes. That gap, $500 versus $24 million, is the number this entire story turns on. The BM-27 Uragan is a 220mm multiple-launch rocket system. Each launcher carries 16 rockets in 2 pods. The 9M27K cluster munition variant scatters hundreds of submunitions across an area the size of several city blocks. For 6 weeks, the 944th had been using 5 of these systems to rain cluster rockets on the rear positions of Ukraine's 60th Mechanized Brigade and on civilian zones in Kreminna and Lyman. ISW and Euromaidan Press both documented the strikes. The damage was real, the trajectory was predictable, and the pattern was being watched. Here is what the 944th trusted and should not have. They believed that rotating positions every 90 minutes inside a wooded area, 38 kilometers from the front, put them beyond effective response time. At that range, a drone strike requires coordination. A HIMARS strike requires confirmed coordinates. Both require time. 90 minutes, the crews calculated, was not enough time. 11 days of observation said otherwise. Retention. Checkpoint. DA self. 5-minute obstacle. The first problem the 414th faced was not finding the launchers. It was finding the pattern. A single observation of a launcher at a tree-line position is a data point. 11 days of observations, cross-referenced with firing times logged by Ukrainian acoustic sensors, and with the SIGINT intercepts HUR had been accumulating, is a targeting package. The obstacle was patience under pressure. Every night those launchers fired, cluster munitions landed on Kreminna. Every morning, the 414th's intelligence cell had to choose between acting on incomplete data or waiting for a cleaner picture. They waited. What they built in those 11 days was not a location. It was a predictive model of where the 944th would be next. The Shark reconnaissance drone operates at altitudes up to 5,000 meters. It carries an electro-optical sensor package capable of geolocating ground targets with sufficient precision for fire for effect. On the morning in question, a Shark operating at 4,200 meters found what the intelligence model had predicted: the 944th's launchers returning to a hide point they had used before. The predictive model worked because the crews had a habit. 38 kilometers from the front, inside a tree line, before first light, they felt safe. That feeling was the targeting trigger. The coordinates moved through Delta. Defense Express and Reuters have both documented Delta as Ukraine's networked battlefield management system, a software layer connecting sensor inputs to shooter outputs across units, with latency low enough to matter in a fast-moving engagement. The Shark's geolocation data entered Delta at 0418. The 414th's FPV strike cell was already positioned forward, waiting. This is the part of the story that did not exist 3 years ago. In 2022, fiber-optic FPV drones were experimental. By mid-2026, they are a standard tool in Ukraine's kill chain arsenal, specifically because of one Russian countermeasure, the Pol-21 jamming system. Pol-21 disrupts radio frequency guidance links. It cannot disrupt a physical wire. A fiber-optic FPV drone unreels a hair-thin optical cable behind it as it flies. The guidance signal travels through the cable, not through the air. Pol-21 sees nothing to jam. The drone flies clean. Retention. Checkpoint. Mike. 10 minutes micro-final. 3 FPVs launched from the forward cell. The targets were the TZM transloader vehicles, the reload trucks parked adjacent to the launchers, each carrying additional 9 M27K cluster rocket pods. This was deliberate targeting logic. You do not need to destroy a launcher to neutralize a rocket artillery unit. You need to destroy its ammunition supply and its ability to reload. Hit the TZMs, and the launchers become expensive steel. Hit the TZMs while they are loaded with cluster munition pods, and the secondary detonations do the rest of the work. That is exactly what happened. All 3 FPVs connected. The secondary detonations from the 9 M27K pods cooked off 2 adjacent launchers. In seconds, the 944th had lost 3 of 5 launchers and the bulk of its forward ammunition supply to a weapon that costs less than a used car. Most people assume that a fiber-optic FPV hitting a transloader is the end of the engagement. It was the middle. The remaining 2 launchers were mobile. Crews that survive the initial strike have a window, a short one, to move. Delta was already tracking them. The HIMARS strike authorization had been pre-coordinated. 2 M30A2 GMLRS rounds, the alternative warhead variant chosen because its fragmentation pattern is optimized for soft-skinned vehicles rather than hardened targets, were already in the air before the secondary fires from the TZMs had finished burning. The remaining 2 launchers did not make it out of the tree line. 8 minutes, start to finish, from first sensor contact to final impact. The 944th's 5 BM-27 launchers, their transloaders, and an estimated 380 cluster rockets that would have reached Kreminna and Lyman over the following month were gone. What is most surprising about this engagement is not the speed, it is the preparation. The 8-minute execution was the product of 11 days of observation, pattern analysis, and pre-coordinated authorization. The speed was a feature of the system. The patience was the real weapon. Foo! Retention. Checkpoint. 50% mid-roll hook. Before we get to what happened on the Russian side of this engagement, and what the Milblogger silence tells us, a quick note. You are watching Fury Military. We break down the Russia-Ukraine war system by system, engagement by engagement, every week. If sensor-driven warfare and the collapse of Russia's conventional assumptions are your subject, subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Now, RIBAR. For those who track Russian-language military telegram channels, RIBAR has become a reference point. Atlantic Council OSINT analysts have described it as one of the more reliable Russian-side accounting sources, meaning it tends to acknowledge losses that official channels deny, usually within a few days of confirmation. After the 944th's losses in mid-June, RIBAR went silent on the regiment for 72 hours. No acknowledgement, no framing, no alternative narrative. The Atlantic Council OSINT team flagged that silence explicitly. In a channel that moves fast and covers losses routinely, 72 hours of silence on a specific unit is a confession by absence. The official Russian line, maintained through Peskov's office and amplified by state media, frames Ukrainian drone and missile strikes against Russian artillery units as terrorism against military infrastructure. Ukrainian aggression, never the consequence of Russian artillery firing cluster munitions into civilian areas. The reality, documented by Militarnyi and confirmed through geolocation threads run by Euromaidan Press, is that 5 Russian rocket artillery systems capable of firing cluster munitions into civilian zones no longer exist. The narrative and the physics do not reconcile. Here is the take that will probably get pushback. The real failure here was not tactical. The 944th's rotation schedule was reasonable by the doctrine they were trained on. The failure was institutional. Russian artillery units are operating against a sensor environment their doctrine does not account for, and their training does not prepare them for. The Pol 21 jammer protects against radio frequency guidance. It does nothing against a drone on a wire. The 90-minute rotation protects against a slow kill chain. It does nothing against an 11-day pattern analysis feeding a delta-connected FPV cell. The 944th was running 2019 doctrine in a 2026 sensor environment. That institutional lag is on the Russian military system, not on the crews. Retention. Checkpoint. Viewer question. Put yourself in the position of a 944th Battery commander for a moment. You have a rotation schedule your unit has used for 6 weeks without loss. Your jamming system is active. You are 38 kilometers from the front. What would you have changed, and would you have had the information to know you needed to change it? Drop your answer in the comments. We read them. The strategic picture matters here. One BM-27 launcher costs approximately $5 million at current replacement cost, based on Defense Express estimates and open-source procurement data from Russian state defense contracts. 5 launchers represent $25 million in capital equipment, not counting the trained crews, the transloader vehicles, or the specialized 220mm ammunition. Russia does not have an unlimited supply of BM-27 systems. The Uragan entered Soviet service in 1975. The production line runs at a fraction of its Cold War capacity. Each loss is not replenished from a warehouse. It is absorbed as a permanent reduction in Russia's cluster-capable rocket artillery inventory. CCIS and ISW have both tracked the broader trend. Russian artillery tube and HIMARS losses have accelerated in proportion to Ukraine's sensor coverage expansion. As Shark drones, Lalika UAVs, and networked SIGINT coverage have extended deeper behind Russian lines, the kill chain has reached further back. Units that believed their operating depth gave them a safety margin are discovering that the margin is now measured in pattern analysis cycles, not kilometers. The 944th's experience is not unique. It is a data point in a pattern. ISW documented 14 confirmed Mueller's losses across Russian formations operating in the Lyman-Kreminna corridor between April and June 2026, the highest rate since the start of the current offensive phase. The common thread across most of those losses: a predictable hide point, a fiber-optic FPV in the first wave, HIMARS or Bodana artillery in the second. The kill chain template is replicating. What this tells us about the current phase of the war goes beyond this single engagement. Ukraine is not winning artillery duels by having more artillery. It is winning them by having better information and a faster loop between sensor and shooter. Russia's numerical advantage in tube and rocket artillery, an advantage ISW has consistently documented, is being degraded not by matching it gun for gun, but by making each Russian system visible and targetable before it can complete its mission. A target can begin to lose the moment it is seen. The 944th was seen for 11 days before it was engaged. Retention. Checkpoint. LUM 278% identity beat. This is what sensor-driven warfare looks like at operational scale. Not a single dramatic strike. Patient accumulation of pattern data, pre-coordinated authorization chains, layered effects from low-cost and high-cost systems working in sequence, and a battlefield management layer, delta, that reduces the time between observation and effect to minutes. Mass alone does not win in this environment. The side that closes the loop faster wins the exchange, almost every time. The 414th Separate Unmanned Systems Regiment has become, as Defense Express noted earlier this year, the most cited drone formation in asymmetry, reporting on the Eastern Front. Robert Magyar Brovdy's unit did not achieve that by being aggressive. It achieved it by being systematic. The 11-day observation period before the June engagement is characteristic. The pattern analysis, the pre-positioned FPV cell, the pre-coordinated HIMARS authorization, none of this was improvised. It was a pipeline, running. The human dimension of what those 380 cluster rockets would have done to Kreminna and Lyman over the following month is not abstract. Cluster munitions scatter submunitions across wide areas. A percentage fail to detonate on impact and become de facto landmines, a problem Ukrainian EOD teams have been documenting since 2022, confirmed by Human Rights Watch reporting and corroborated by OSCE monitoring data. The elimination of 5 launchers and their forward ammunition supply is not only a military exchange, it is a dud submunition problem that will not happen. That calculation does not appear in the cost-benefit math of a kill chain analysis, but it belongs there. One detail that stuck with me going through the OSINT documentation on this engagement: the Rybar silence was 72 hours. That is a long time for a channel that typically turns Russian losses into a counter-narrative within 24 hours. When a channel that exists to manage the story of Russian losses cannot find a story to tell about a specific loss, the loss is significant enough that no available narrative is better than silence. Rybar's editorial judgment, whatever its motivations, is a form of confirmation. The 944th's losses were real, and the scale was not obscurable. Retention. Checkpoint. 92% forward question. The forward question this engagement raises is not tactical. The tactical answer is clear. Fiber-optic FPVs plus pre-coordinated HIMARS authorization plus delta connectivity equals a kill chain that rotating artillery cannot outrun. The forward question is doctrinal. How does Russia adapt an artillery arm built around the assumption of electromagnetic dominance in a battlefield where the other side has found the wire that bypasses the jammer. The Pole 21 system is not going away. Its limitations will not be patched by a software update. Russia needs a new concept for operating rocket artillery in a sensor-saturated environment, and it needs it faster than Ukraine is expanding that sensor coverage. Based on the current loss rate, the timeline on that doctrinal adaptation is not generous. The second forward question is industrial. 5 BM-27 systems are gone. The 220mm Uragan production line, based on open-source analysis from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute and from conflict armament research documentation, is not running at replacement pace. Russia can absorb individual losses. It cannot absorb a pattern of losses without eventually feeling the reduction in its cluster-capable HIMARS inventory. If the 414th engagement template is replicating across the Lyman-Kreminna corridor, and the ISW data suggests it is, the question is not whether Russia's HIMARS capability degrades, but how fast. If you want to track how Ukraine is extending this kill chain model to Russian air defense and logistics networks, the next video covers exactly that, how the same sensor-to-shooter architecture is reaching targets that were considered untouchable 18 months ago. Subscribe to Fury Military. We break this war down system by system, without noise, every week. The point of this analysis is not to celebrate destruction, but to understand the military and human realities behind it, because the clearer we see modern war, the clearer the value of deterrence, stability, and a just peace becomes.